passed out that packet already, I want you to go ahead and do so. That way each family member has one in front of them. Extras, I'll come by, grab them in a moment. Now, the reason why we're kind of taking a step away from Springboard for a day and working on a different packet has to deal with a discussion that teachers had back in November. So you might remember in November that you folks had this weird 3-day week at the very beginning of the month, and teachers were kind of stuck here, kind of like they were in prison, because you guys had the day off, but we didn't. And we got to meet with the high school teachers. So we met with Sierra Vista teachers, we saw a couple of the magnet teachers, and we asked them, when our kiddos come to you, what do they need help with? What do they need more support with? And it has to deal not with knowing what tone is, but how do you prove that tone can be found? So we had students actually come back to us earlier this year, our accelerated kids, saying that they had to do work that I'm giving you today and saying they needed a lot more help. It was something that we didn't touch on enough, and they were struggling with it. So this packet that you're getting today is something that's going to be coming every week throughout the next 2 months, just to help strengthen your understanding not only of what is tone, but how can you prove it's there. Okay? So this packet that you're getting, it's not going to be the exact same thing you get in high school, but you do have some weekly assignments that are very similar to this. And we want you to not struggle, but be able to succeed right from the get-go. So, if you haven't put your name on the packet, please do so. I'm going to walk you through some of the workings. Some of it you'll be completing on your own. Okay? So if you just follow the screen, make the markings that you see appear, you'll be good to go. All right, now, first thing that I want you to be able to figure out is how do you tackle the actual packet? So how do you understand what's in front of you? So what we're going to do first is, sounds silly, but I want you to write the number 1 next to the directions box. This packet's going to be your go-to practice that you can return to anytime you're given a new TP-CASTT packet and you need help with it. So Jacob, could you read the directions that are in that number 1 box?
As we see, as these leads annotate that are listed to labels and simply the TP-CASTT store. We'll also complete now.
Okay, what I'm going to have you folks do, I forgot to tell you, definitely have a highlighter. If you have more than one color, you might want to take all of those out. Now, the first thing to understand with the packet is that it's not one specific task or homework piece. There's actually 3 separate components in this packet that each get their own grade. So I'm going to have you highlight these 3 separate pieces in box number 1. So the first task is annotating the text. And we're going to be annotating a poem. The second task, you will complete a TP-CASTT, which you've done many times before, back in Unit 1. And the last task is completing an analysis. And we're just going to remind ourselves, hey, these are 3 separate tasks. I have to complete all of them because that is this homework packet. Okay, now after that, in box number 2, and we'll go ahead and label it number 2, it gives you the breakdown of each of the 3 tasks. So how much is each task worth? So you know, the homework is worth a total of 40 points. Now that's pretty heavy. In terms of homework that you folks have had, this one's got a lot of weight associated with it. Other stuff that you've done for novels, it's been about 50. Well, this one's actually worth 40, so this one's pretty close up there. Now, the last box, box number 3, is specifically for the annotations. That's one task of the 3 that this packet covers. So just by looking at that box, how many annotations does it look like you need to make? Just a quick glance. There's someone showing you the number. There's 4. Okay, there's 4 specific annotations that we have to make. And what I'm going to have you do is just highlight, well, what exactly are they? So one of the annotations that you'll have to make is circling 4 to 5 words that show positive connotation. That's not too terrible. The second annotation will be underlining 4 to 5 words with a negative connotation. Third type of annotation, you'll be drawing a line where you see a shift in tone. Last type, you'll be labeling those sections where you drew those shift lines as either positive with a plus sign or negative with a minus sign. That one task alone, it's got 4 components within it. Okay, now right below these directions is actually listed the second task, which is the TP-CASTT. Now, before we even read the poem, one of the analysis components, the title, we have to tackle first. And this is where we make the prediction. Now, what I'm going to have you do is go ahead, flip to the back side of that form, and you're going to see the poem title, along with the poem itself. Now, the poem title is in Latin. It's Invictus. I'm not going to tell you what that means, nor do I expect you to. Considering that a poem title is in Latin, though, what do you think this particular poem might be about? So, we're going to go back to the front side, and I want you to write your prediction in that title bar. And once you've got your prediction, I'm going to have you check out the screen again. And the screen is going to give you some background about the author, which is going to be pretty important in order to comprehend the purpose behind this poem. So the poet, William Ernest Henley, he contracted tuberculosis of the bone when he was a child, so he was very sickly. Now, as a result, he ended up having his foot and part of his leg amputated. So that's a pretty heavy realization as a child. As a result of that, he ended up spending a lot of time in hospitals, not only as a child, but as he got older. So there were constant complications that kept popping up with this man. Now, I bet you can think of a time, maybe someone in your life, or maybe a commercial or a story that you've heard of, about an individual who consistently has to go into the hospital because they're ill. Maybe they have that moment where they're okay and they're let out of the hospital, but then they get back in. So there's a lot of challenges there. There's a lot of mental strength that's needed. There might be times when you want to give up, times when you say, I'm done. And that's certainly possible. But there's also a lot of times where there's people, children too, that say, no, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be tough, but I'll get through it. So this poem is going to be very much based upon that fact, and it very much was a direct result as to what happened to him as a child. Now, the poem itself, Invictus, it's not very long, but what I'm going to have you focus on first is not only reading this piece, but also tackling the 4 annotations. Now, you don't have to do this alone. I don't expect you to, but I am going to give you a time frame here. I'm going to have you take about 8 minutes, and in those 8 minutes, all I'm going to ask you to do is read and complete that first task of those 4 different annotations. If you want to work by yourself, you can, but you certainly don't have to. All right, I'm going to give you 8 minutes. In those 8 minutes, go ahead, read the poem, and complete those 4 annotations.
Word.